All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Derr, and today I'm joined by Dorge from Fire Knock and Tyler Terry from Winterhawk Outfitters. The focus of today's conversation is around the arrow rest. We're talking about limb-driven rest, cable-driven rest, which is best for which scenario, hunting rest versus target rests, how to adjust your rest if your arrow is doing something through paper, and much, much more. This is a topic that I wanted to learn more about. I have a really great bow tech that does all this stuff for me. But personally, I like to know why things do what they do. And now I have a better understanding of how an arrow rest is supposed to function, how to get the most performance out of your shot from adjusting your arrow rest. So if that interests you guys, make sure you stick around. Thank you guys for tuning in week to week here with the Deer Gear Podcast. If you guys have been following along and you like what we have going on here, please leave me a 5-star review on iTunes and on Spotify. That would help me out a bunch, helps me reach new people. Also, guys, Exodus is about to drop some bombs. You're not going to want to miss what we have coming down the pipeline, and I'm talking very soon. So make sure you go to the website, ExodusOutdoorGear.com, and sign up for the email newsletter. We're not going to spam you. We're only going to tell you when cool stuff is going down, meaning new products and saving you some money in your pocket. So if those two things interest you, make sure you go to the website and sign up. And with that being said, let's get into the podcast. Hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's season. Be safe out there, have some fun, and let's get into the podcast. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Gear Podcast. This morning, I am joined by none other than Dorge from Fire Knock, and back on the show is Tyler Terry. You guys may have heard a couple podcasts from Tyler. He completely rearranged my entire archery setup last year. So glad to have you back, man. How's it been going? You've been pretty busy.
It's been crazy busy. I've which is good, but it's a good problem all at the same time. So I've had zero time to handle a lot of things I really need to get done, but we've been running kind of wide open with hunters and the bow shop and some other projects, some engineering stuff like that. But it is good, just busy. I'm trying to figure out time to put it all together.
Yeah. Did you get some deer on the ground this year yourself?
I shot a great big bear. I haven't really got the deer. I've probably put 2 or 3 full days deer hunting, and most of that's been looking for the right deer, I guess. And we found some big deer, and we've had some people get on some big deer, customers, stuff like that. But it's been, I just haven't had the time to go myself. I'm going to try to maybe go around this weekend around Christmas and stuff, because maybe some people will be tied up with family and I can run out I can run out and go try to find a deer. But, and then I've got some stuff coming up later in the month, maybe. But really, I just haven't had time. I'd love to go. I've been wanting to more than anything. It's actually been getting in the way of my progress with doing other things, because I'll get tied up thinking about it and won't be as productive as I need to be. But, no, not for me. I shot a big bear, but not any deer.
Dorge, did you get any deer on the ground yet?
Oh, I just got 2 small ones. You remember, I'm a public land exclusive. So far, I haven't seen anything big yet. But maybe, just maybe. I'm going out to the church, which is next to downtown Chicago, and for the night. So I want those what do you call it, public land,
the urban deer.
Oh yeah,
it's like this isn't, when you're on public land, it's not the public land; it's the way to access it.
Yeah. See, Dorge is going Seek One style. That I'll be interested to hear how that goes. I just, man, I can't imagine hunting in the suburbs of Chicago, but
actually not suburbs. I'm hunting Chicago, period.
Wow. I want to just come film that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm right on Hallstead on Chicago 1. You can actually, where I hunt, it's about, I would say 60 yards from Chicago City 1 Hallstead, 152nd Street.
Wow.
Amazing. So you don't have to worry about being quiet, because all the noise and traffic and cars and stuff are keeping your noise down.
You can see one. And then I'm what? And then behind me is the Verizon tower.
Jeez.
Oh, man. So you got airplanes flying over you and all kinds of stuff.
No. I'm a little bit more south than Midway. So
Yeah.
152nd. This is
I
quite
got
south.
you.
I'm pretty much
Got you.
the last edge of Cook County. Then the moment I go down another 3 blocks, I'm in Sager.
There you go.
Two like total opposite dynamics with Tyler in Arizona, like super remote, and then Dorge going to Chicago. But one thing in common, you guys ready for this segue? One thing in common that you guys both have to have is a well-tuned arrow rest. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about arrow rest.
Absolutely.
And Dorge, this is something that you're pretty passionate about. I've heard you mention it before, so why don't you intro into this conversation?
I personally think arrow rest on a vertical bow or even on a crossbow is one of the most misunderstood piece of equipment. Everybody, I'm one of the first guy who, when I first started arrow rest, the only arrow rest I was using was a TM Hunter. If you know what that is, that was one of the most simplest thing. And by the way, back then, an arrow rest is not supposed to be more than $20.
Yeah.
Okay, just to give you an idea. And yes, just for referencing, a Warper back then is about $2. So it's about 10 Warpers, you got a decent arrow rest. So let's see, the whole concept of the arrow rest, a lot of people really, remember, the compound bow is different from a recurve, okay? A recurve arrow rest, you shoot off the shell because you got feather. The current compound bow with the new generation of vanes, you have to let the arrow pass, theoretically, without touching the vanes. That whole process was such a big deal, and most people really do not understand why and what the real purpose of the arrow rest is. A lot of people assume an arrow rest is nothing to hold the arrow while you shoot. In some way, that's the correct statement, but the statement was never understood and explained totally. The word is totally. What happened is that the arrow rest itself need to hold the arrow as long as possible if the person can hold the bow stationarily on a compound bow, on a compound wheeled high-let off bow. That's where the problem is. I remember back in 1980, that should be 88, when first Trophy Taker come up with a drop weight rest, everybody was so thrilled. Because all of a sudden, everybody's supposed to be able to shoot accurately now. But then the fact is that if you are not good at holding a gun, you want the barrel to be as short as possible. So you are no longer affecting the trajectory of the bow with the barrel. But if you are really good at holding a barrel over the stand, you want the barrel to be as long as possible. That pretty much is the entire concept of my understanding of an arrow rest. Now the real question is that what arrow rest would work for you? The real question is that how good are you holding at the bow? That was the real question. And there's so many people seems to do not understand that. So that's the reason when I introduced like the arrow rest, you would not believe how many people within 1 week come back to me and take it off.
Explain the design of the arrow rest, AERO rest.
My arrow rest?
Yeah.
My arrow rest is now you can actually hold an arrow to a position in plus and theoretically in plus and minus 10,000ths of an inch while shot. That itself is actually very bad.
Why?
For most vertical bow guys.
Because of the way that they're executing the shot?
Exactly. Because most people do not execute the shot like a true shooter. They usually, if you look at the older shooter, especially the guy with the surprise release, they can't hold the bow straight. But those are what most people are using, which make a drop away rest the choice of most. Because, you know, you don't need an arrow rest that shoot up to, say, 600 yards. You need an arrow rest to shoot about 100 to 150 yards. But then most people are not shooting at 11 ring or 10 ring. They are shooting at an animal or a big target. That's the reason I know when I design arrow rest, I over-engineered. But for the people who want that, that's where the differences. And then that's the reason there's so many design. And that's the reason I say for anybody out there who don't know any better, who don't shoot very far, the drop away and the whisker biscuit is pretty much the best way to go. That's the reason when whisker biscuit comes out, it solves so many problems because the tolerance of the whisker biscuit is so wide, and you can't see the difference of the tolerance.
Sure. So let's focus on the drop away rest real quick. Tyler, why don't you give us the difference between so you have what, two major arrow drop aways? You have a cable driven and a limb driven. What's the difference there, Tyler?
Well, actually, that's one of the biggest deal. The cable driven rest that means the thing will drop faster. The reason we go limb driven system because it will hold the arrow longer. The limb driven will always hold the longest based on the way you put it together. And that's the reason I remember when the first whammy comes out, I remember my discussion with Tim Gillingham. We all agreed that was the best arrow rest out there made because it being a drop away, it hold the arrow the longest. But then a lot of people don't like it. The reason they don't like it because they can't hold their bow as steady as long before the arrow rest drop. So now imagine this. This is the easiest way for me to explain an arrow rest process. Imagine you got a power stroke of 28 inch. Minus your brace height, you only get about, say, the 20-inch power stroke with the 6-inch brace height, you only got 22 inch. That actually your arrow is supposed to guide the arrow. If your arrow rest dropped 6 inch before it, you only got 16 inch of actual guiding of the arrow rest. So the longer the arrow rest stays, the longer the guiding. The faster the arrow rest drop, the less the guiding. The less you're able to feel if your bow is not holding the arrow from the bow, the arrow rest to the arrow correctly. So the worse you are in your form, remember the form not of geometry, the form of holding the bow steadily. This is where a lot of people really do not know that. And how do you find out how good are you holding your bow? As I said, the easiest way is a trick that I learned from Rod White and Jim Burnsworth. Go to eBay and buy yourself one of the cheapest laser field point. Screw that thing on, pull the bow back and point it at 30 yards and see how long that stays. You'll find out how good a bow your swarm is. Then you of course take that off and shoot it. You'll find out that most people, the moment when they are very close to the end of the bow, they drop their hand. Now, if you got a normal arrow rest, it's not too bad because you're dropping below. But if you're dropping at left and right at the same time, that's where the problem came in. But then there's another issue. If you're not good at holding and you got a long brace height, you remember the arrow left the nock. The arrow are still in some way controlled by the arrow rest. That's where when you have a drop of weight, it's gone. The arrow is not flying with no more touching. It's how long are you actually touching the arrow rest and controlling the arrow rest. Now remember, the arrow is also flexing. So there's a lot of key in it. That's the reason there's no arrow rest that's solid. And in most cases, you notice like the QAD and so on, they are really solid. That's the reason they drop away faster. So what happened if your arrow got the back tail, got say the first and second harmonics, and then actually the arrow flex down and the arrow rest is still there.
And bounce off.
That's the reason in traditional, every single arrow rest got springs on it. And that's where the tuning of the arrow rest and the arrow gets so critical and so hard. And most people really do not understand the process. And that's the reason a drop away seems to be a very easy way for most people to able to shoot sort of accurately. Because if you look at 30, 40 yards, it's really not a big deal. But just like if you want to shoot something at 30, 40, say 100 yards with the say 340, with a say 4-inch barrel Magnum, compared to say a 12-inch barrel hunting rifle. Well, if you only want to shoot 100 yards, you cut 10 inch off the hunting rifle, you're still pretty decent. But that's where pretty much the whole deal is. I mean, that's the closest I can able to explain. Maybe Tyler can add some thought to it.
Yeah. I mean, my take with some of that is it, he's 100% correct. And you really kind of got to figure out, you know, to get your rest tuned right from the beginning where you run into less issues. If you're not going to worry about what direction your arrow is flexing, and you're not going to be one of those people that has, the best form and so forth and all that stuff, a rest that gets out of the way faster is 100% going to benefit you. Okay. If you are someone that pays attention to the direction that your arrow flex is coming up there, because people have this misconception. They're like, and I have people come to the shop all the time. They're like, well, I spine align all my arrows. Well, how do you do that? Well, I put it on a dial indicator and I found the stiff spot. I'm like, that's awesome. Well, you found the stiff spot, but you didn't find where the arrow is actually bends or the direction it moves under a load. So when the arrow becomes dynamic, it's going to bend in a specific place, and you need to know where that is. And they're like, oh, well, you just got to find the stiff spot. And I'm like, well, what kind of arrow are you shooting? Then they tell me, and I'm like, well, that arrow, most all of them, all carbon arrows, with the exception of, well, maybe Dorges, have a helical spine. So it's going to have multiple stiff spots in it, depending upon where you place the indicator in the arrow. So if you're not paying attention to all those things and you know where your arrow is going to begin with, then an arrow rest that gets out of the way, say your arrow only travels 4 to 6 inches on it before the arrow's out of the way, that's good for you. You're the same guy that'll benefit from a whisker biscuit or something like that, and that's fine. And you're going to be able to shoot relatively well for most practical deer hunting purposes. Let's say back east, not so much here out west, where your shots are under 30 yards, really doesn't make a damn what you do. I say that not trying to be a turd, but just under 30 yards in those conditions, you can get away with a whole lot. Now, when you're trying to fly a broadhead 80 or 100 yards or beyond, where, like I would say back east, most whitetail are shot, let's say east of Texas and east, most whitetail are shot at 20 yards or less.
Yep.
Most. Okay. Out here, our average shot on a mule deer or a coos deer or something is probably 60 or 70 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Getting closer to them than that is hard when you're out in the desert. Now it can be done. People shoot them at 20 yards and stuff, but I'm just saying it's on average, they're longer shots. So, but really it comes down to, like he said, how well are you at aiming your bow, and what does your shot form look like once the arrow is fired? When that string is traveling back to brace and it is propelling your arrow, what is your ability to keep that bow in the same place until the arrow leaves, like completely leaves the bow, not just the string, but actually once it's detached from the string, it still has some travel time there before it actually clears the bow. So what does it look like then? That that was where things become more critical. That's where mistakes happen, right? That's where your bad form or torque or whatever is shown. That's where you see it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, for me, when you go from a cable driven drop away to a limb driven drop away, personally, if I'm going to shoot one, I prefer the limb driven stuff, not just because of even down to the fact that it supports the arrow longer, or I get to pick how long the arrow is on the rest with one of those, right? Based on how I tune it. Where with a cable driven one, you can to a point tune that, but it's a whole lot smaller window. Mm-hmm. And then you almost have to set your bow timing up to that, because if you have that cable driven rest at the full upright position for too long, that cable becomes pulling on your bow cable. Mm-hmm. And then it starts changing the dynamic of your bow at full draw. So now you're going to have one cam that has that's got more tension because the cable is being tugged on, basically, right? Exactly. So there's a fine line there between how you're going to be able to make those work. Me, preferably, in my experience, a limb-driven rest is more reliable, and it's easier to work on in the field. If I'm out in the middle of the mountains or in the desert or whatever, and something happens to my lift cord on my limb-driven rest, I don't have to have a bow press. I don't have to go shoot it through paper again. I don't have to do any of those things. I can just take a spare piece of cord out of my bag, put it in my rest, pull it back down to where it's supposed to be, cut it off, burn it, I'm done. And everything goes right back to the same place it was. Where if I have that happen on a cable driven one, I now need a bow shop technically almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need a press, I need to time it, I need to go shoot it back through. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to go on because just because your rest is in the same position, like that part never moved, you didn't change it left or right or up and down. If your timing is not exactly the same with the limb driven one, you still got to retune it because
The
it's
cable
not
driven
because of the amount of support that the arrow has is now changed. So if
Mm-hmm.
that timing is not identical, it's still going to change what it does through paper because it changes the amount of support that the arrow has. And if not all of your arrows are tuned the same, so like say not all of your arrows dynamically are the same, they may say the same thing on the label. You may have fletched them all in the same place on the label, but if you haven't dynamically figured out what your arrows are doing, then you may have one little bullet hole, but the rest of them won't. Or maybe you'll have 7 that do and 5 that don't. And those 5, 3 of them do the same thing. The other 2 do something different. So the thing is there's there's a whole lot that goes on with this that gets missed. And there's a whole lot of things, boat people walk in, and even to this day, I made a post about this not long ago. I can't tell you, and it's just because this is what people are used to. Like this area, this is what people are used to. They walk in, they hand me their bow, they say, "Hey, paper tune this." I'm like, "How much time do you got? Did you bring your release? Is your bow dressed the way it's going to be whenever you go hunting? Do you got a few minutes to sit here with me so we can do this?" And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "I need you shooting the bow, and I need your bow dressed as if it was you were shooting at an animal. So if you shoot with your quiver on your bow, it needs to be on there. If you put 5 arrows in it, put 5 arrows in it." Like all of those things matter. It kind of blew their mind. I'm like, "Look, if I shoot this thing and it works for me, that does nothing for you." So the thing is, facial pressure is different. Hand pressure is different. The release that I may shoot it with is different than the one that you're shooting it with. And all those things are like, well, does that matter? And until I take them back here and actually physically educate them and show them the difference, and they may shoot an arrow that has a perfect bullet hole. And I'm like, "Now watch this. Put your face in it a little bit more and shoot it this time." They shoot it and it just whacks the tear. I'm like, "All right, now draw it back and shoot it this time and put a little more thumb pressure than you do heel pressure." And they'll shoot it and it changes the tear again. It's like, so here's the deal. If you can't make a repeatable shot, we're wasting our time and wasting your money.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is when you get to that situation, arrow rest, arrow, choices in general are far broader spectrum than what people want to, I think a lot of times put the time into.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that they're getting this information from don't understand it themselves, right? They don't understand how critical it can be because they're shooting 20 or 30 yards and they're getting the result that they want. When you're shooting them, and we're talking about highly precise stuff, right? The guys that are maybe making a living with a bow, ask them how critical they are about their stuff. They tune every single arrow, right? Every one of their arrows, their goal is to make them identical. So it doesn't matter what arrow they pull out of the quiver, every one of them has the same point impact. Even down to, I can change what an arrow is doing just by where I change the contact point of the launcher on the arrow shaft. If I want the arrow to act stiffer than what it really is, I can scoot the arrow rest back. If I want it to act weaker than what it is, I can scoot the arrow rest closer to the point of the arrow because it's changing what the arrow does dynamically based on the point of contact or the node of where the rest contacts the arrow. So, all that stuff, it really comes down to, you kind of got to evaluate what is your purpose. Like I ask people that all the time, "What are you going to do with this?" They're like, "Well, hunt." I'm like, "Okay, that's a broad one. What are you hunting? What are you doing with it? What is your effective range? Like how good are you at 80 yards?" And that tells me a lot, because normally people are going to lie to you anyway. So they're like, "Oh, well, I can shoot them all in a Dixie cup at 80 yards. Okay. So that means they could probably hit a pie plate at 80 yards consistently, right? Which is not bad. But what that tells me is, that kind of gives me an idea what your attention to detail is and things of that nature. Then that can give me a direction for you, 100% a QAD or something like that would be awesome. And you'll have no issues with it. It'll do everything you ever want to do because you don't know what you don't know. If you're wanting to shoot 100 yards and beyond and you're wanting to do that with a fixed blade broadhead, now we're going to have a different conversation. One, I'm going to look at you first, right? We're going to go back there and I'm going to watch you shoot some arrows. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, you may think this is dumb, but there are times, especially if I'm ever struggling or if I feel like I'm not making as good a shots or I'm noticing some funny arrow flight, I'll stand in front of a roll of paper and shoot 200 arrows through paper just to make sure that I'm making the same shot all the time. And it's not that I say that I believe paper tuning is the end all be all, but what I'm saying is it tells on me.
How consistent you
If
are.
I know those arrows are all the same, and at one point when I set it up, they were all shooting crisp, perfect holes. If I stand in front of that thing and I can repeatedly make that happen, well, then that lets me know that at least I'm being consistent and maybe there's something else I need to look at, right? So, I mean, that was probably a long-winded version of answering something that was really simple, but what I'm getting at is like to Dorge's point, you kind of need to evaluate yourself first. Hey, what am I doing with this and what kind of shooter am I? And be honest. If you want the best result to be successful, you got to be honest with yourself in archery. This is not
Mhm.
you can't go buy your success. You can build a custom rifle that can shoot 1,000 or 1,200 yards. I run into this all the time here. Long range stuff is the new deal out west, especially in Arizona. And I'll probably get strung up for this. They're gonna have a town hall meeting. Everybody's gonna get their pitchforks out here in a little while. But what happens is there's tons of wounded stuff all over the place. I paid $10,000 for this rifle. I should be able to shoot at that 80-pound coos deer at 1,000 yards. No, if you don't have the ability behind the thing, it doesn't matter what you have, how much money you spend on it, or any of those things. I could take a 15-year-old and put him in a Ferrari. You think he's going to be able to drive the wheels off of it? No. He's got $1 million car he can do nothing with. There's guys got $10,000 rifles that can't shoot shit at 100 yards. Okay? You got to be honest with yourself. What am I going to do with this? What kind of shooter am I? And then we can build you a bow or a setup around that, from your arrow, the whole thing, right? And that's kind of where it starts. And for most people, you can take a QAD, a ripcord, or something like that. Even the original like trophy taker style spring loaded, dropaways, and do whatever you want to do with them. And can you be accurate with them at 100 yards and stuff? Absolutely. Are there better options for someone that's real serious? 100%. A limb driven one is going to give you a really broader spectrum of tunability, and it's just an ease of use. They're either broken or they work. There's no like in between. A limb driven one, and it doesn't mess with my cable and string dynamic at all. It has nothing to do with my string. I hate putting stuff in my strings. Hate it. I don't like putting silencers in a string. I don't like, tying stuff to them that's going to pull on them or add tension to one side or the other. I don't like doing any of that stuff. So for me, primarily, I would rather have somebody either use some kind of fixed position rest, hell, even the TM Hunter style rest works great for some people. The simplicity is amazing. If you're shooting a conventional vane configuration, like a 1 or 2 degree offset and a standard 3 fletch configuration, dude, those rests are amazing. Just like the old school bow doodle rest or a TM Hunter or something like that, they shoot incredible if you can make a good repeatable shot, right? So that's kind of the thing. And everybody, big helical and multiple vanes, putting 4, 5, 6 vanes on an arrow and all that stuff is kind of like, to me, it's a handicap. It's trying to fix something that people are unwilling to spend time to do. So it's kind of like going to Big Bertha golf clubs, right? Like the really refined guys are playing with blades and more compact stuff, and they can really move the ball around and all that. Where then you got the guy that doesn't care and just wants to swing it as hard as he can. He gets the biggest driver possible and just lets it rip, right? That's like big helical and 4 fletches with giant vanes. That's kind of what that does. It fixes things that you haven't really spent the time to see. You know what I mean? Like if I got a guy that's okay, he makes a pretty repeatable shot, but he can't consistently shoot a good hole through paper, and he's wanting to fly a fixed blade broadhead, I'm going to put 4 big Max Stealth vanes on there and just let him have it. You know what I mean? Because 30 to 50 yards, it's going to do what he needs it to do, and he'll never know the difference. and that's not being rude. That's helping you be successful based on your ability, right? So there's things we can do. You're just masking an issue, because you get one set up really well. You don't need much vein to be able to fly one really good. If your bow's tuned good and you're making a really consistent shot, it doesn't take a lot of steering to make that arrow fly beautiful, right? But there's a lot of things that got to do that.
George, you had something there?
Oh, I was just saying I agree with what Tyler says so much. I think Tyler I will summarize what Tyler said in one word: know your ability first.
That was
and
more
be
than one
honest
word.
with your sorry, one fun phrase: know your ability and be honest with yourself. I mean, it's so true. I mean, unfortunately, they think fishermen are liars. Bow hunters bragging about ability is worse than fishermen. I will tell you that because I'm both.
Hey, in the backyard, everybody shoots 30x Vegas games. Everybody. If you don't believe me, look on Facebook.
I think another point to what you said about big helical and 4 fletch or 5 or 6 fletch veins, it's also trendy. It's what's happening right now, and so is putting 4 fletch on them. And you said it's masking the problems, and that's just like what Dorge always talks about with like making your arrow super slow. It's I don't think necessarily that the shooter knows that's what they're doing. I think they're just following a trend, but in result, they're masking flaws, and they're like, "Oh my God, no wonder this guy shoots this because it shoots so good." Well, it's just because it's fixing. It's not fixing. It's hiding issues that you have that you don't know you have.
Well, you can fly a Pringles can if you put enough fletch on it and make it slow enough. You know what I'm saying? I mean, seriously. I mean, there's quarterbacks throw footballs 70 yards and they fly pretty good. You know what I'm saying? But it's slow and heavy. So that's the deal. I mean, if you're going to shoot, why would you take all the technology of the new high efficient, high performance, high speed bows and dumb it down to the point of where you're losing all that? But then you have all these, physicians, physicists on Facebook or the internet that are like, oh, the bow becomes more efficient the heavier the arrow gets. Well, that's all relative to how you look at it. I'll put it to you this way. These bows are designed to run wide open. Okay. That's where you're going to get the most. And then you got the people that are going to argue, well, there's a happy medium. Well, what if, there's a point where the speed and the weight are optimal? Well, in my mind, it's best if you go one extreme or the other, either damn near at IBO as fast as it'll go, or super heavy sometimes. And I tend to sometimes fall in the middle, but I tend to set my bow poundage based around the arrow weight that I'm going to use. So that way I'm shooting it about as hot as I can get it. If I'm going to shoot a 400 plus grain arrow, I'm probably going to be shooting close to an 80-pound bow. I don't have a long draw length. I don't have the benefit of being able to shoot telephone poles at 300 feet a second like some people do. I'm like 28 inches on a good day. If I stand up tall, that's what my draw length is. And so for me, most of my stuff, I stay in the 74 to 78, 80 pound range. And, I shoot a 390 to 430 grain arrow right in there somewhere. And that kind of gives me the most bang for my buck. And it gives me a lot of options, right? Especially with the things that are available today. And if I set my arrow up properly, I can shoot one of those 140 yards, right? So, with the bows now, bows are getting way faster and a lot better, so I've got a 64-pound bow that I can shoot that fast with a 385 grain arrow. But, people are like, well, no way you would elk hunt with that. I'm like 100%. And with the right broadhead and a good tune, I'll shoot right through it, never slow down.
Yep.
But people are taking their information nowadays from people that have only killed a handful of animals with a bow. Well, what do you know? How much experience do you have, right? Maybe you need to take this information from someone who shot hundreds of animals with a bow. That's where you need to start pulling your information. But like you said, it is trendy. There's a lot of stuff out there you can get away with a lot, right? And perception is reality in archery. If you believe it is, then it is, right? But science proves something completely different. And the problem is there's not enough of that applied because there's not enough people with the education. Not just saying like degrees or any of that. I'm just talking experience. Experience and education to me is the same thing, right? If you spend enough time with something, you are getting an education on that stuff. Whether you're a degreed person or not makes no difference. If that's what you do, well, then you're educated on that subject, right? So take it from those people. It doesn't have to be somebody like me or George that maybe has a higher science background, but it could take it from someone who's maybe killed a lot of stuff with a bow, or all the arrow arguments on online now. Like the one I've seen anymore is Joe Maxfield's really good about posting a bunch of stuff like that, and I'll go through and read them, and it's crazy the stuff that people come up with. And then you have the guys that are, oh well, I'm an engineer, I'm a this, and I'm a that, blah blah blah, and they start talking about all this stuff, and I'm just like, man, you have so missed the boat. Arrows are not bullets. You cannot figure slugs the same way you would figure an arrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many other things that go into the equation on arrow flight that are being missed. And the thing is your arrow rest is a big point of that too, because even your arrow rest plays into arrow harmonics, the dynamic of the arrow whenever it leaves. If you can set your arrow rest up to where your arrow has less like deflection.
We lost them.
You're creating more efficiency. You see what I'm saying? So the less harmonic that arrow has, the better your arrow flight's going to be. The faster it's flying on its own and isn't being manipulated or planing or still in paradox, then the better it's going to be. And effectively, the flatter it will be. It's retaining more energy the less harmonic is in that thing, or the less oscillation is in that arrow. And people don't understand that you can 100% control that with your arrow rest. It's not even your just the arrow build itself, but you can control that stuff with your arrow rest.
Position of arrow rest, the design of the arrow rest, and then how the arrow rest you want. I mean, just like a very important thing a lot of people do not understand. The spring of an arrow rest is one of the best tuning tool, and how many people actually understand it.
Yep.
I don't.
Yeah, because if you look at it, 90% of drop away have no spring adjustment. You know why? They couldn't. They hold the arrow, then they drop the weight. But then when you have spring adjustment, think about it. If your arrow is a little bit soft, like after you hold the bow, a binary cam bow, the arrow is actually skewed towards the left. Okay? Oh, sorry, to right. And you know that you can't do any more shimming. So now, if you know what you're doing with a tiny turn on the right spring of your arrow rest, you change everything. But how many people actually know what to do with it? How much pressure are you changing? That's so beyond most people's ability. That's the reason, when my arrow rest was actually first moved into Tech 15, the PSC crossbow, and then moved to Raven. That arrow rest in Raven, I mean, literally, I'm selling hundreds and hundreds of those. And people are just beyond amazed how good it is. Because on a Raven crossbow, the form from the barrel to the arrow rest are always perfect.
Perfect, yeah.
So now you can really appreciate the precision of the arrow rest.
Yeah.
But how many guys can hold their bow from release to the arrow knock, leaving the rest and not move? That's the real question.
Sure.
I mean, you think about so many people when they shoot the bow, I thought that, are you doing a dancing? Are you shooting? They shoot the bow dropped to the left, the right hand moved to the back, the head moved backwards. I mean, it's like, are you doing performance art? How are you shooting? When you shoot, nothing should move until the arrow left your rest. Yes, left your rest. That was not known.
Yeah, I think it's something that you see a lot when you watch people shoot. I guess I'll try to explain what Dorge is talking about. When you have the surprise shot, when you pull back and you release, and your bow arm falls away to the left, and then your release arm also falls back, and you're like clenching your shoulders together, and you're almost doing like the chicken dance a little bit, and you're like pulling away from it. And if you're doing that before the arrow is released from the rest, you're going to affect how the arrow is flying. If you don't do that at the same time, like Tyler was saying, repeatable, you don't do that the same way at the same exact time every single time, it's going to change how your arrow reacts off the bow.
Yeah, 100%. The thing is I think, the reason most people won't shoot the command style shot where they're just holding it in the middle and then, set the release off on their own, goes down to anxiety and target panic issues, right? I mean, it's probably no secret that the guys that can control that, your Jimmy Lutz, your Robert Householder, Kyle Douglas, Mike Slosher. Though, I mean, we're talking like I just listed like some of the best archers on the planet. When they're on, it's unbeatable. It's the most accurate way to shoot a bow, period. If you are mentally strong enough to control that, right?
Yeah.
Where you don't have anxiety issues and all that stuff. So, for the people that can't do that, that surprise shot is their most accurate way to shoot, probably. And then, so we got to build their stuff differently, right? Where, a Kyle or a Jimmy or a Robert, Mikey, whoever, those guys, really, because of their shot execution and style, they can get away with honestly a lot more than most of us can.
Sure.
And that's where, one of those guys could benefit from a more stationary setup, just because of how they execute a shot, which is stinking impressive, man. If you have the ability to shoot that way, it's incredible. Or man, another one I left out. He is like Gillingham, dude. There's no, and a lot of guys, like Gillingham's always said, he's like, look, I don't hold a bow still enough for me to confidently be able to shoot like a hinge or a back tension, and I've heard him make that comment before, and I don't know, the guy holds a bow pretty stinking good.
Absolutely.
But for him, it is the most accurate way to shoot, and it's arguably, if you're on and you can shoot it that way, those guys will just shoot one hole in a target. It's incredible. Where, the rest of us that may have an anxiety issue or target panic, so to speak, that surprise style shot is what keeps you in the middle or close to the middle, the most consistent. So, it, like I say, again, it comes down to you. It's so personal. That's the thing with archery, is it's so individualized far as how we set your equipment up.
Sure.
And being able to talk to people that come in the shop, people probably wondering what I'm doing, but I try to get a background on everybody before I work on their bow. What are you doing with this? I like to see them shoot an arrow or two, a lot of things, even down to like knock fit when I'm building their bowstring. Like, what are you doing with it? Is it going to be a target bow, hunting bow? What are you doing with it? What arrow do you shoot? What nock do you shoot? Because then I might change, some guy might be 105 thousandths finished center serving. Somebody might be 112 or 13 thousandths finished center serving, depending upon what nock they shoot or how much control I want it to have. You know what I mean? If it's somebody that I feel needs more forgiveness, I'm going to make their nock fit slightly looser. Because the tighter your nock is on your bowstring, the more control that string has on how your arrow leaves the bow, even down to a rotational standpoint. The tighter the serving is, the faster it rotates your arrow, all those things. So there's a lot of stuff that comes to that. And really, if we had more people that could shoot like Tim and those guys, the fixed, old school arrow rest, even down to like a spring steel launcher, is crazy accurate way to shoot a bow. I mean, like ridiculous. That's why a lot of the super target guys, like really target oriented guys, still shoot a spring steel.
That's the only thing they shoot.
And like even down to like Jesse Broadwater hunts with one. He trusts it so much that that's what he takes to the woods and hunts with. And people are like, man, you're crazy. He's like, not if I kill stuff with it. I mean, it doesn't make me crazy. It makes it work for me, right? People got to get out of this. We live in a like a Me Too world. Hey, what do you shoot? Oh, I got a Matthews with a QAD. Oh wow, me too. And everybody jumps and does the big Toyota commercial high five. You know what I mean? And it's like, not that there's anything wrong with that stuff. It's just don't shoot it because that's what your buddy's shooting. Maybe do some research and figure out what works for you, and not like on Facebook blast of, hey, thinking about getting this rest. What's everyone's thoughts? And then 7,000 people leave a comment and they're all different.
Yeah,
man, you got to go. There's no easy button for this, right? You got to go and actually do some work. It's going to take a little bit of effort. You really want to be good at this game. You want to be successful. You're going to have to put some time in. There's rare easy buttons in archery, right? You still got to work. Even though the bows are more efficient, rests are better, materials are better, all that stuff is incredible. And in today's age, I can take someone from never shooting a bow to shooting pretty stinking good in like an hour. But beyond that, it's gonna take work. You've got to stand behind your bow. And that's the part that people are still missing sometimes. People still want to shoot it 5 times before season, and then they go out and shoot at 7 deer and empty their quiver and have no idea why they didn't hit one. Well, it must be the broadhead. I must need a new string. Well, this sight sucks. Do you ever think that maybe you need to shoot your damn bow? That's the thing. So, we can't start putting everything on equipment. We got to start looking at, what am I going to do this? Was this even set up right to begin with? And then down to your ability.
Sure. Yeah. With all of that being said, and I'm going to try to put some generalizations in here. So we have Tyler, this is going to be directed towards you owning the pro shop and working on a lot of people's bows. We have someone that comes into the shop. Their arrow setup is correctly spined. They found the first dynamic bend. Awesome. Their shot is super repeatable. Okay. This is the whole scenario. And they're shooting through paper and they're getting a left tear. What do you do to the rest to correct a left tear, a right tear, a low tear, a high tear? Let's go through that generalization. Everything the same.
Well, to answer that question for me to begin with, I would look at their bow first and not necessarily the rest. So I would look at timing and cam position.
Yeah, I'm saying all that stuff's good. We're only going to manipulate.
So if it's a left tear, so they're right-handed, right?
Yep.
If they're right-handed and it's a left tear, I'm going to move the rest or move the arrow closer to the riser. So I'm going to move. So if it's a left tear, I'm moving the rest right. Okay. That's going to help fix that left tear. If it's a right tear, I'm going to move the arrow rest left. Okay. I'm going to move the arrow away from the riser. So people nowadays, everybody wants to get hung up on Hoyt tells me that it's got to be 13/16 from the edge of the riser shelf to the center of the arrow. That's what my tune is. Well, not so much. There's nothing wrong with moving your arrow rest slightly to make this thing work, right? So, if it's a left tear, I'm moving it closer. If it's a right tear, I'm going to move the arrow away from the riser. If it is a low tear, well, then obviously this is the only part where tuning your arrow kind of works in common sense. You're going to lower the rest. Okay. So if you're getting a low tear, then I need to bring the point of the arrow down. All right. If I'm getting a high tear, then I need to bring the point of the arrow up. Okay. So you can do that with either moving your nocking point or you can move your arrow rest. Okay. But initially, if I can keep stuff down the middle and I can fix it with the bow, that's what I like to do. Makes everything aesthetically look really nice and function well, right?
Sure.
But nowadays there's some bows out there that to get it to tune, you can't, because everybody thinks that, well, if I set it at 90 degrees and perfectly down the middle, this should shoot a bullet hole. Well, that's not how it works. everybody's hand pressure, facial pressure, release, all those things make a difference. And that's where moving the rest slightly one direction or the other, or the cable rod or whatever, is going to eliminate the issue that you're having through paper. So, people can, it's endless really. You can do it with point weight. You can do it with fletching. You can do it with, there's a lot of ways to remedy aeroflight issues. And your rest is really kind of a small part of that. Not small, but it's a key player, but it's just one of the options that you have. You know what I'm saying?
So don't use one of the options only. What Tyler really saying?
Yeah.
Because if you think of your air rest is the only thing you sight. Just like I remember the day when my bow is totally crooked on my X80 Oneida. The cams are actually off. I used my sight to fix it. Yes, my sight was diagonally pinned. It shoots. Okay, I've used my sight to fix my bow, but my sight was like 3 diagonal dots. No, I'm not joking, because
I remember those days. Oh, I get it. Yeah,
when I was a Oneida with the top cam plate, when they put my Oneida bow, my upper cam was crooked. I do not know better. So I ended up to have to buy it. So I said, wait a minute, the sights are all in line. It's no good. I need the pins to move left and right. I do not know. That was not supposed to happen.
Yeah. No, I remember. That's the thing is your rest. You can fix a lot, man. There's a lot you can do with your bow. But here's something to think about. And this is kind of to my point about why in that situation I would go to the bow first and not the rest. And this in some of our schools, and like our seminars, our bow school or whatever that we put on, I proved this just as an example. I can make a bow shoot a perfect bullet hole in certain instances where the arrow is pointed way off to the left, like not down the middle where you would think, arrow's jacked, or way in towards the riser, right? Or you to the point to where you don't have enough sight to catch your arrow, right? You don't have enough windage in your sight to be able to catch up to where your arrow's impact. And in certain instances, you can fix it to where it shoots a bullet hole, but is it right? No. So that's where a lot of times I'll look at some other things first. If the rest is arrows running pretty level, not in any instance ever do I think having one run uphill, like your arrow, like if your bowstring is plumb and the bow's perfectly level on both axes, and you look up and you put a level on your arrow and it's running uphill, like the point is above the nock, that's a no-go. In no circumstance is that okay. If on the other hand the point is below the nocking point and that's where it shoots, I can live with that. That's okay. There's a lot of bows nowadays where your arrow runs slightly downhill to get it to shoot right. Okay. Can you fix that and make it level? On some bows, yes. And you do it with timing. You end up having to put the bottom cam contact in the cable before the top and so forth to make all that work. And that's fine. It's whatever you need to do or whatever aesthetically you have to see to be satisfied with it. But like I say, don't, your rest is super critical, but don't just lean on that first, because I can fix it with an arrow rest and it looked janky, like really bad, right? So, I can move the cable rod way one direction and point the rest in another direction, and we can make it shoot, but it's not going to look right. And you're going to have to make some custom contraption to get your sight over far enough to be able to even shoot. Right? So, we don't want to go down that road.
No. Dorge, do you have any concluding remarks on the arrow rest?
I think today's arrow rest is, I sort of, I will not use the word despise. I will use it's like, this is what the entire industry needs, and that's what they're making. Just like everybody is trying to make the stuff so forgiving to the point you're not really getting the best out of it. I think, just like I remember when I was helping a gentleman with the NASP, they got a few kids just really, really bad at shooting. I say, I'm going to give you donate you 3 arrow rest. And they're going to shoot really, really bad. The moment they shoot decent, then you put back in the original rest with it. you make them shoot it, but don't make them to the point they give up shooting altogether. Because the arrow rest is so precise. Every single error is exaggerated to the point of ridiculous. So in other words, imagine this. So if you are not good and form, not good at holding, yes, a fast drop away would be, 1 point. I forgot, I nearly forgot. That was a thought of the cable-driven arrow rest, very critical. And I'm going to put my 2 cents in it. You want that cable to be as long as possible, not as short. So many people literally say, I went to school and they told me the short is right there. Do you know what that means? You're increasing the angle of that drive cable to your down cable if it's short.
Short, yeah.
You want that to be as long as possible. So just in case, if you tug on it, it's not going to kill your entire bow, and then you're done hunting.
Yeah, no, 100%. Too many times I see people bring their bow in and they're getting contact issues with the cable-driven drop away, and whoever initially set it up literally just pulled the cable straight back and attached it to the down cable, which a lot of times on bows would be like your bus cable or your binary cam, whichever one's traveling down. And it'll be super short and it'll be directly behind the rest. And they're wondering why it doesn't function correctly. I'm like, in order for this thing to work, that cable needs to travel vertically, not horizontally.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it lifts your arrow up when you draw it back does not mean it's going to work right. And the timing might even be okay. But when you fire it, it's going the wrong direction. So it doesn't create the slack needed for that arrow rest to be able to move past its catch and actually fall away. So Dorge is 100% on that one. Too many times, I mean, get it 6-8 inches below the rest if you can.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got more room than that, do that. Because it creates the correct cable path for the rest to be able to function properly.
I don't know whether you remember the first QAD comes out. It was really on a wrong angle. I have to wrap the string around the pulley first to get it to give me the function I need.
Yeah,
it was so ridiculous, and I was so afraid that the cable was going to pull out. But at that time, I got a gentleman who was really smart. But luckily, the bow worked. I would remember I was shooting a Darton 3600.
Yeah.
Guess what? My cable was my air rest is tied to the slide.
The cable slide.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wrapped the cord around the entire pulley, and then go to the cable slide.
Yeah.
You know what? It was so freaking good.
Yeah.
But you know what? I was so afraid. Every time I hunted, I was afraid that the cable would fall off the roller. Finally, I said, you know what? Screw this. I'll just improve my form.
Yeah. So the thing is, I think, kind of in closing for me, Cameron, I think the thing is invention happens because of necessity, right? The reason that we have the arrow rest and the stuff that we have nowadays is based on necessity. QAD, ripcord, all those have their purpose. Hamski, the Pro Drop from like AAE, any of the limb-driven ones, they have their purpose. No different than a Whisker Biscuit, a Spring Steel, and Dorge's arrow rest. It's all out of necessity, right? And a lot of it just comes down to, where do you fall in line with those options? What do you want to do with it? And what are you creating that you need? Do I need more forgiveness and I need less control necessarily? I know it sounds like a negative, but it's not. There are people that need less control. I don't aim a bow as well as I used to anymore. So I use a shorter stabilizer, like I'm talking tournament wise, not hunting. A short, a lot of people use a 30-inch bar for stabilizer, right? I use like a 24 or a 20, but with more weight. I aim it better because when a big bar is out there and it moves off the dot, it's harder for me to move it back. So when it's in motion, it moves more. The shorter one, I have more control over. So my picture may be nervous, but it's nervous in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's where I need the forgiveness. Now my shot form and all that stuff works great. And even in slow motion, my bow really doesn't move at all from the time it's fired to the time the arrow leaves. But the thing is you got to know where you need it.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So for me, it's not in the rest, it's in my stabilization. I shoot 140 yards with his QAD. Hell yes, he can. And it's amazing. But, you know, everybody, could he do it with a hand ski? Oh, yeah. Yeah. He can do it with a spring. That's why, I mean, tournaments and stuff, he shoots a spring launcher 100%. For him, it's the most forgiving, most accurate way to do it.
Sure.
Mhm.
You know, so you've got to figure out, it's all based on necessity. What do you need? And then that's where you got to go. But you got to, if you don't know, then you got to find somebody that can help you. You know what I mean? Find
absolutely
somebody that
agree.
can break it down for you. You know, go have somebody watch you shoot your bow, and then or have somebody video you shoot your bow, and then maybe you can be like, hey, I think this is what's going on. This would probably be better for me, right?
Sure.
And then,
That's
and then
exactly what I would have suggested. I mean, I think Tyler said the best. But when all fails, we all got smartphone now. Take a small video of yourself. Find someone to take a small video of yourself and look at what you're really doing, instead of just throwing equipment. And I mean, I remember when I was slightly into the 3D world. I mean, I saw a guy drop $1,500 on releases and not able to shoot right, and he keep going.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. The guy bought 7 freaking squad skis release. You know,
the stands.
Stands squad ski. Yes. And he said, "Oh no, I need a different one. I need a different one. I need a different one." I say, "No, I think you need to look at how you're shooting to start with."
Mm-hmm.
That's what it all boils down to. That's what it all
Mhm.
boils down to. But
It's hard to just buy success in archery.
No, exactly. I think Tyler finished the best word. If you think you can buy success in archery, you need a different spot.
yep, mic drop there, fellas. Well, we're running a little long here. I appreciate your time, Tyler. Busy schedule. Appreciate you taking an hour out to chat with us. If anyone wants to find you, find your shop, if they are in Arizona and they want someone to look at their shot, where can they check you out?
So we're in Safford. They can find us. Our website is WO Toad, so wotoad.com, or you can find us on Instagram. It's Winterhawk_pro shop. We're on Facebook, also Winterhawk Outfitters and Terry Built Original Archery Design. One's an engineering page, the other one is our pro shop. Yeah, that's it, man. There's a few avenues there. We haven't been very good about getting a lot of this stuff out there, but hopefully maybe we can do that in the future if I get 5 minutes.
Dorge, same for you. If anyone has any questions for you or wants to check out the Arrow Rest, where can they check you out?
Yep, fireknock.com. We just updated the website. We just changed the DNS, so we are all good.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, guys.